Alrighty, welcome to Romera Records virtual cast. Today we have on Ken. How's it going?
Going good. How are you?
I'm doing well. So found you from Pod Match, just like a lot of people recently. So if you could, I guess just go into who you are, what you do, and how you got started.
Absolutely. I'd say first and foremost, I'm a kid from Chicago, so grew up, up in the freezing cold north, and now I'm here in Tampa, Florida. So that's kind of the where it all started, right? Got really into technology as a kid. So today I run a digital transformation company. So we help folks build new software platforms. We help them get on the cloud, and now we're getting into more AI services, which is what I've really been excited about the last year or so. But just started off with me being curious. I've been kind of tinkering with technology my whole life, decided to go to school for it, and then eventually decided to start my own business. So my main company and is called RevStar, and that's where we do all those different IT services I just talked about. But I also have been spending a lot of time lately, really just kind of like I said, getting into the whole AI thing and doing a lot of AI strategy coaching, just trying to help people navigate what AI is going to, how it's going to impact their business and how they can potentially kind of get ahead of the game and start implementing some of these technologies.
So how did you get into, I guess, that not so much the career field, but just like the idea of working with technology? Did you go to college for anything like that? What was it was your high schooling, any kind of tech schooling or anything like that? How'd that start?
I think, I just was always fascinated with it. So I was the kid that would rip apart all his toys and, try to put them back together, right? So I'd have little handheld games. You remember those really kind of weird little LCD games when I was a kid? I would break them and try to fix them. But truthfully, I grew up in an IT family. I was lucky to be exposed to it. So my dad was in the space. He worked for IBM for a number of years. My mom was in the space. So I just kind of was always around it. We had these big old ugly computers with the big floppy disks in my house when I was a kid. And there's pictures of me poking around on the keyboard at, probably 2 years old, or a really young age. So I just was exposed to it early on. I was always more of a hobby. So I taught myself how to code when I was in junior high for fun. Started building websites for people in high school to make a little extra cash. And it was one of those things where had to pick a major for school, and I was like, I'm pretty good at this. And there's jobs out there, so I got into computer science in college, and then grew my career for a while. Worked at some big corporate companies, and then ultimately decided to venture out on my own.
So that's something that I really think is important that a lot of people don't talk about. Which I mean, even you were like, asking me before we got on, what do you want me to focus on? But like, that's great that you talked about your parents because I think a lot of people, they see these really successful people, whether it's in tech or what have you, and they're like, oh man, that person's just so smart and just so innately just doing that. But it's like I had no idea their parents had been in that business for 30 years. I had no idea their parents, did that. And people don't realize what kind of influence your parents or family members, brothers, sisters, cousins, whatever, can have a huge influence on what you end up doing as an adult. But because of how they influenced you as a kid, like you said, dad working at IBM, like that's crazy. I think I know 2 people that worked at IBM now is your dad, and then the other one is a professor I had in college. Um, so it's like that's a very niche group, and it's important that we, think about the connections that we have in life because it kinda helps us, guide who we are and what we do.
Yeah, 100%. I think just being exposed to it's important, right? So we actually support, me personally, and also the company, group called Think Big for Kids, and their mission is to go around and kind of expose kids to different careers. So we come in and do these career showcases and explain, what RevStar does, what are some types of jobs that are at RevStar, right? Because it's not all just technology, right? We have sales, we have marketing, HR, all the stuff that any company would have, just to say, there's maybe you don't like necessarily programming or doing something that's highly technical, but you can still get a great, career in a company that's doing things in technology. And I think it's super important to just expose people to that, because I had that benefit. I may not have taken that career choice if I didn't know it was available, or hadn't been, put on a computer, taught how to fix a computer. There's some part of that where I was inquisitive and I like to do that stuff. But if you're never shown that it's something you can do, you probably will never get into it. So yeah, that's definitely something I'm very cognizant of, and I try to pay it forward and give back, because I've been lucky enough to have those experiences.
Yeah, and so I'm currently in Memphis. I'm from Alabama though, but here in Memphis, there's this company called Tech 901, and Tech 901 actually has like a facility inside the Crosstown Concourse. It's like this massive building that used to be like a Sears building, but they have training courses on how to do techno technological type careers where people are learning how to do like I think it's like with networking and other types of technical jobs that most people aren't exposed to at like the high school or even college level because it's very niche. It's like, do this job. They're trying to show you how to do specific jobs so that once you finish, you get hired. Like there's no like, oh man, I hope I can find a job now. It's like, no, you finish. Let's go get hired. Let's go do. And it's great. And I bring that up because Memphis is a predominantly black city, and there's a lot of poverty here and a lot of crime and stuff like that. So for somebody like Tech 901 to bring in their ability to bring knowledge and wisdom on those types of career fields that mainly like black people aren't really accustomed to, as you said, like exposure, being exposed to those things help you get into those type of career fields. So it's really cool knowing that there are companies that are providing these opportunities. And so I actually went to a program called the Academy of Advanced Manufacturing, and it was
Mhm.
a Rockwell Automation. Do you know who Rockwell is? Or Allen
Yeah,
Bradley?
yeah, okay, yeah, that's familiar.
So they're in the manufacturing field, and that's another thing that I found out after I went to the program is like just because somebody's in tech doesn't mean they know like all the different kinds. Like, there's so many different fields. Like manufacturing is like its own thing, and like okay, so Alan Bradley makes these things called HMIs, and HMIs are called like it's a human machine interface, and it basically looks like a huge or a pretty decently sized iPad. I think they make them in like 17 inches and like 6 inches. They make them in different sizes, but you can either get it with buttons or all touchscreen. And you would put it on like a panel so that if you wanted to control objects in manufacturing, you could use it and you just touch the screen and whatnot. And I say it looks like a big iPad just to give you an example, but like an iPad is 1,000 times better than this machine. And it blows my mind that somebody like Apple wouldn't get into the manufacturing business. But again, those are two completely separate worlds. So, but yeah, anyways, I was just bringing that up because the opportunities you were talking about, exposure and stuff like that. So it's cool that companies are now understanding how to implement their teachings and knowledge into areas to give people more exposure so that more people are getting into these technological career fields.
Yeah, there's Apple can charge more money for an iPad to a consumer. The manufacturers probably only want to pay a couple $100 for those screens. But no, and you're 100% right. I'm glad to see they repurposed the Sears into something educational. The one by my house they turned into an arcade, which I guess is cool. But it's good to see them, using that to teach people these careers, because the IT, I think I kind of say this tongue in cheek, but really should become the kind of manufacturing job of today, right? So you don't necessarily need that degree, and I'm not promoting that people don't go to school, but there's a lot of really good boot camps and educational programs out there that you can go through that will get you ready for an entry level career. And a lot of us in this space say, "Oh, we can't find talent. We can't find talent." Well, we have to, help train that talent and help invest in, these types of programs. So, for me, exposing people to it early on so that, when they're in grade school, they know about those careers to then go to those boot camps, and then somebody has to run those boot camps. So it's a whole ecosystem, and it takes, a lot of different people to make that happen. But there's no reason you can't do one of those boot camps and someone puts you in an entry level coding job, especially with some of these AI tools we have now that help you code and learn faster. So that, yeah, to me, it's just, everybody, like I said, doing the same and paying it forward and creating those opportunities. And it's needed, right? We need the workers, people need the jobs, and there's plenty of them out there. So everyone's just got to, kind of get on board and do their part.
Yeah, and I think America has a big niche problem. For instance, for me, I graduated. My first degree that I got was a bachelor's degree in business management, and after I graduated, I found out that that is literally the one of the worst degrees that you could possibly get, because who's going to hire somebody right out of college to be a manager of a business when it's like, what have you done? Like, you just went to college and you just got a degree. So I think the experience is more important in that degree. And so it's like, all right, let me get this management degree so that I can start from the bottom and work my way up, when you could have just did that in the first place. Which I know a lot of companies still value degrees, because they're like, we want you to have a degree to be able to reach certain tiers in their job or in their career field. But I do think that being able to go to those types of schools, or feeder schools or whatever, is important, because it helps you understand like the exact job. Is like, well, I want to work in networking. Well, what do you want to do? Do you want to work for Cisco? Do you want to work for, want to get like your, was it like TIA or whatever those things are,
Yeah,
like all the,
Network Plus is a good one to start with.
yeah, like, what exactly do you want to do? And I think these types of feeder schools and trade schools and stuff like that kinda help you
Mhm.
figure that out. They help you, like, hone in on, "Oh, I want this job. I wanna work for this company and do that job." And so those things are definitely helping out.
Well, and the funny story with the business degree. So when I was in school, there was a lot of work being outsourced in IT. So a lot of the guys I was in class with jumped over to a business program, and I was like, all right, I'm not going to follow the herd. I'll stick with this, right? So it's just funny to hear you say that. But I think the important part there is, if you can get a job and then decide, okay, I want to get this management degree, like, you may not want to track towards management anyway, right? So if you turn some of these careers into more of a trade school, you can get a job in HVAC and make good money without a degree, right? So why can't we get you in an entry level IT job? Then if you want to become a vice president someday, or maybe you want to work in a more of a leadership role, even as a first line manager. These are things that not everybody wants to do. So if we lower the barrier of entry to kind of get in and, like you said, explore what you're interested in, and then say, great, now go to school because you want to track towards management. uh, I think that's a way to support people who want to go that route, but also don't exclude folks who just want to come in and work hard and make money, right?
Yeah, and we've kind of created this barrier for people to even want to get degrees, because the job is requiring you to do this. It's like, man, I have to do that just to get this job, and it kind of discourages people from doing certain things. So, yeah, we should just lower the barrier to. I think, well, I know a lot of things online are saying Gen Z doesn't like to work, but I
Yeah.
do think a lot of people genuinely like to work. They just don't want to work on things that they don't like. So if we could lower the barrier to get into jobs, people would be more inclined to do jobs that they actually want to do. And then they will get that higher education as they go along. But when you create these barriers of like, oh, go get your degree and then you can come work here. It's like, man, now I have to do 4 years of something and dread it and barely pass my classes and all that kind of stuff just to come work at whatever business, then find out I don't like it, then I have to go back, change a major, do this. It's a very sloppy process that can be more honed in for sure, in my opinion.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of guys that work for me as developers have, English degrees and biology degrees. One of our product managers joked the other day and said, "Yeah, I was a I was a physics major. So to your point, a lot of times you go through school, and school is expensive now, right? So I sort of don't blame these kids for wanting to go spend 100 grand on a degree, when they're 18 to 22 years old and they're not really sure what they're interested in yet, right? That's a huge commitment. I look at, even from when I went to school to now, the price of going to school is like 5 times as much. So it's not like a small Troy, I'll just, yeah, I'll go to school, right? Like that was a little bit easier. I'm assuming we're probably around the same age. Like when we were going to school, it wasn't a minimum $100,000 student loan bill when you get out. I mean, that's a significant amount of money.
Yeah, and I do think that education is important, but as you were just talking about, like, these access to information is getting so much more easy for people to get through AI and stuff, which I do wanna talk about that because, like, I could talk about that for forever. Just people being able to have access to that kind of knowledge and on the fly. And it's like, why do I need to go sit in a classroom for 4 years to get this education when I can just ask ChatGPT information? And I think that that's great. Like, a lot of people see that as a problem. I actually posted on Facebook one day that this was like, I think 2 years ago now, maybe more. And I said within the next, I want to say 20 years, I think that college, the traditional college, as in, like, I sign up for classes, I go to school for 4 years and I'm done with university. I think that that will be irrelevant within the next like 15 to 20 years. I think it will be more of these feeder schools, as I keep calling them, or trade schools, teaching you how to do specific jobs, and if not, then businesses will just start hiring people and teaching you on the job because task will become so simple. Like, as I said, I'm an automation engineer and I have a lot of projects I've got coming up where I need to program stuff, program robots, program PLCs, all that kind of stuff. And we're eliminating jobs. We're creating these AGVs, they're automated ground vehicles, and they come and they're like forklifts. They come and pick up stuff. So we're going to eliminate like 4 forklift jobs. We have a slate system for granules that just moves things in and out, and people currently do that. They want to automate that, so that's going to eliminate some jobs. So it's like, yeah, these things are going to become easier for people to learn. And I went to Rockwell school within like it was 90 days that I was there. So it was 3 months of just training and I'm done. When
Yeah.
some people are going to get mechatronics, is mechanical and robotic type schooling that you can get a degree now. That could be a 4-year degree, and I went for 90 days, straight to the source. So, yeah, I think these jobs and, the education, how you get the education will become more and more accessible to people and cheaper.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Like when I learned to code, I literally was reading a book, right? And then later you had Stack Overflow, and now there's things on YouTube. And to your point, now like Chat GPT can write code for me, right? So it's just it always evolves. But we also have, that opens up new jobs, right? So now a prompt engineer is a job, right? Or they'll be with robots, you have a mechanic to fix a car, there'll be mechanics to fix the robots, right? So it does create some different opportunities. I think what's interesting is like watching all these tech, different techs or tech advancements converge together. Like when you're a mechanic and you have some AR, right, glasses on, and then it's got AI. So when you're going to fix a motor on a car, it like diagnoses what's wrong, walks you through how to fix it, right? So getting people through those trade schools will be even quicker. Like you said, you may be able to be a mechanic in 3 months because you have this augmented reality, tech combined with AI. So, when I look at like a YouTube, that's just a repository of information. So if I had these glasses that found me the exact thing that I needed to watch, pop the video up, it just saves time, right? So to your point, all that information is there. We're just making it even quicker to get to it. And the problems we can solve then I think become greater. So when I look at, it sounds like you're a tech guy as well. When I look at what we do in coding, at some point somebody wrote binary, right? And that was way before my time. But now we get into languages where we have all these boilerplate frameworks and things that are, abstracted from way far away from binary, but it allows us to focus on larger problems. I mean, nobody spends 3 days writing a print function anymore, right? Like that was someone's job at some point, was to sit there and figure out how to print a document. So it just it just changes over time. So when these new technologies come in, we're able to hand off certain things and go focus on larger problems. So it can be a little scary, right? And there's always uncertainty when something new comes in. But I just look at, just in the time I've been in tech, where we've come from, just in basic things like how we, code different web and mobile applications. There's so many advancements that make it faster, so you can do a lot more in a shorter period of time.
Yeah, and even, you just talking about binary stuff, I had to basically learn how the difference between that and then all the way up to, like, doing stuff in hexadecimal, where it's just so many big numbers and so many options and opportunities for things to happen. And this is just basically like, all right, it's either a yes or no, 0 or 1. And now it's like, all right, how do you want this to happen? It's like all all these different options that we have nowadays is fantastic. But as you said, it could be scary to some people because they don't know where to go, how to get help. But even we were talking about mechanics, like I've heard some people say that cars are getting so advanced now that it's almost hard for mechanics to even work on them because they're so used to just these regular parts that they can access and read about. And now it's like only the dealer can work on it. You got to take your car to the dealership because only they can work on it because they implemented some technology and computer system so ridiculous that only they can figure it out. So it's good and bad, I would say, for depending on what you're doing, like who you are and how you provide a service. But yeah, I mean it's fun. I think it is for people, the human race in general. We have the ability to use these tools. So on that note, AI, let's until the end of this podcast. So how are you using it? Let's start there. How are you understanding it? How are you using it? What are you doing with it?
I think kind of like everyone, I started out doing the basics, having it help me write content, emails, just playing around with it. And then, obviously being a company that does digital transformation, we've been lucky to be able to bring this stuff to our customers, more recently. So we're an AWS partner. They have some really great, what I would call more B2B tools for AI, right? They're more model agnostic. And so really virtual agents inside of companies is kind of what our focus is from a business standpoint. So we have, for example, a customer that has a dispatching component to his business, and they have, over 50 people doing this dispatching work. And we, are actually currently and almost done creating a proof of concept for an auto dispatcher that uses large language models to, mimic the decision making process that currently all these humans are doing. And to your point, that's going to displace some people, but there's plenty of opportunity there. They're a growing company. There's way more work to do. But these are just very repetitive tasks that they kind of only work a certain way. There's some variation in there, but we couldn't do that. We tried to do that a few years ago with just algorithms, and it didn't work, right? It goes beyond just kind of basic machine learning. So these large language models are really a game changer. And the great thing about being with these model as a service tools that like an AWS has is it's much quicker to spin something up because you're not building your model from scratch. We're able to just layer data on top of one or more of these model as a service models and POC something like this within a few months. And so that's going to be a lot of what we're reaching out to current and new customers to try to help them out with, just to come up with good use cases. We have another customer, they do professional services work in a little bit different space than we do, but they do a lot of, you know, reading documents and putting together, another document based on what's in those documents, right? So there's another perfect case. So we're working with them to put an LLM in there to streamline some of that. So again, they'll still need people to do the proofreading at the end, but it saves a ton of time. And they can also open up a self-service component of that for their customers in a SaaS model versus always having to pay a human to do it.
So when it comes to understanding data and reports and all these documents and stuff, what have you seen as far as the reliability of AI when it comes to analyzing any of the like spreadsheets or numbers, even words? Like it's like using like words is the most difficult thing, right? Because it's they have to translate, they have to understand what stuff means, but numbers is easy, right? Because it's just all zero through nine is just numbers. But has it been reliable as far as understanding documents and stuff like that?
It depends on the model. Some are actually worse with numbers because they do
Oh,
more like key value pair type of matching, right, on certain on things. But the interesting thing is there's always this old saying in tech, right? Garbage in, garbage out. I think it's the same thing. You have to have clean data, train it correctly. When you're dealing with like a chat GPT where the whole world is putting things in there, it's a little harder to control. But when we're working on the things that we're talking about with customers, we're able to take their data. It's very specific, so it's a little more accurate. But again, it has to be clean, right? Half the battle is when you're working with someone on our side is is the data clean? What do we need to do to clean it and get it into some place where you can train the models? If it's in spreadsheets, there's some steps in between where how do we get it into a more permanent data store. But in general, it works well. I think the more specific you are with it, even going back to like a chat GPT, if you can be very specific with the outcome you're looking for, how you want it formatted, it does better, right? So the more ambiguous your prompt is, the more likely you're going to get, a lot of variation in your answer. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of, and not everybody can do this, but having your own in your business, right, versus using a public one. For that reason, you can train it with your institutional knowledge that is from your staff and your experience. So of course, it's going to work better than just something that's trained randomly by the internet.
So we might be speaking a little bit of gibberish to some people who understanding this. And don't get me wrong, I'm no expert. I'm just diving into a lot of this stuff, but I've been hearing words of like the AWS. I've heard about OpenShift. There's Python, C++, like all these different coding languages. What have you noticed as like a commonality between all of these type of coding languages? Does it seem like one is kind of becoming the standard, or does it seem like just use any of them, they'll work? What seems to be a trend going on in this space?
Yeah, I'd say AI is kind of like the Wild West. So I'd say, stay by the villages that are closer to the tracks, right? So your major cloud providers, AWS, Microsoft, Google, they all have model as a service offerings, right? Microsoft's are more heavily underpinned on OpenAI, which is Chat GPT. And then your languages. I mean, Python's been a popular language for data science, right, for a while now. So that's never a bad choice. I mean, you can do back end coding in Node and other languages, but Python seems to be, the sweet spot of it's great at doing this sort of number crunching, so to speak, and it's an easy language to learn. So if you're getting started, I recommend that language for sure. But anything that's mainstream, right? There's a lot of, unfortunately, with all the AI hype, there's a lot of vaporware out there, for lack of a better term. So you just don't want to put your hitch your cart to some horse that takes you way off the beaten path and then isn't around, right? But all the major players are out there and they all have offerings, so you can't go wrong with with the big guys.
Do you see any type of like gap or struggle that's going on in the tech world that's preventing people from, I guess, just either one, just getting these types of jobs, or two, companies from using, as you talk about your customers, the people you work with. I'm sure they're heavily relying on you to like help them just get tasks done. So are you seeing any type of gaps for yourself, or people trying to come into that space to I guess facilitate work, facilitate services?
Well, I think, it starts back to what we were talking about earlier, is how many people are learning about this in school or in boot camps, right? So we have to get people educated on how this stuff works. The other part of it right now, we're in a little bit of a weird economic climate, right? So a lot of folks are being told you still have to innovate, but we're cutting budgets back, so you still need to keep the day to day going. So finding creative ways where you can get this kind of stuff done. We have some opportunities to upskill our staff through some of those partnerships we have with an AWS and some other folks, right? Which does help. But it's just I give my team time to tinker and play around with this stuff, so we can go back and offer it to customers and say, hey, you could do this. But it's tough, right? I'd say another thing you could do is, if you're looking at implementing these technologies, go find students that are studying this kind of stuff and do an internship. Proof of concept, something, it can't hurt. Worst case, if it doesn't do what you want it to do. But yeah, right now I think a little bit is just how many people are learning this stuff and available to do it, and then the other side of it is just budgets, right? Not everyone has a budget to hire an AI engineering team right now to get this stuff done, and a lot of it is too, people may not inherently see the value right away. So if you can come in and build a small proof of concept and go, here, look what this does, then you might get more support and funding to go ahead and implement the full thing. But being smart on how you do it, right? So like I was saying earlier, using some of these model as a service offerings, and other tools and platforms that cut down the R&D time, right? So the shorter the time to get this POC out and show that it does something, the lower cost to doing that, the better. But yeah, it's just tough right now. A couple of years ago, people were throwing money at R&D projects and creating all kinds of new SaaS platforms and this and that and the other. And right now, it's just a little bit tighter, right? So you have to get creative with it.
Yeah, something that you were just touching on is, I think, is very important, and it's for people to understand value in what these career fields are providing. And contrary to popular belief, companies don't know the value of of a lot of this stuff. Like, I know a lot of people, oh, I should get paid more at my job. It's like, yeah, it's sometimes it's hard for companies to understand how valuable something can be, especially when it's new, like AI, because they just see it as, oh, this tool. Like, okay, so for instance, at my job, um, we were trying to find a safe place. Again, I'm in a dirty manufacturing plant. So we were trying to find a safe place to put this computer, and we didn't know exactly what to do. But this one dude at work has been experimenting, like he just got a 3D printer and he was experimenting with the 3D printer at work. He was like, "Oh, I could just print a case." And then somebody was like, oh, "Okay, how much is that going to cost?" And he was like, uh, dollars, pennies, like like not much at all. And then they're like, "What?" And then he was like, "Oh, who are we gonna get to make it?" He was like, I'm just gonna make it. I'm just gonna print it out." They were just so confused at what he was saying. And they don't know the value. They don't understand, like, instead of hiring some company to come out and make this bracket and make this whole setup, he's literally just gonna print 3D print a case for this computer so that it doesn't get dirty. And it was as simple as that. But companies just don't understand the value that this technology can bring to stuff. So, financially, if you're like, man, well, how much money does these things make? You could be making 70 grand a year. You could be making 200,000 a year. You don't know, because it depends on where you're at and what that company values, and how much they value a person like you who knows how to use the technology. So I think that's something interesting that's gonna leap forward in these career fields.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you still have companies who I think haven't gone through that realization that they're a technology company. Like anybody that's in business in 2024 has some technological component to their business, right? Even if you're, a lawn maintenance company and you're using Jobber to make it easier to schedule, service orders, right? Things like that. So there's no reason to be doing everything on paper today. There's tons of great SaaS platforms. So, but some people haven't gone through that yet. So then you bring them AI, and that's just a whole nother thing. So they'll get there in time. So you might not see, every small business running to AI right away, but it'll get there. It may come in more of a prepackaged SaaS type of tool, right? Uh, Small things I see, like we use HubSpot. HubSpot's got a write an email for me button now, right? Like there's just little things coming up that'll kind of start to get integrated into the everyday life where you won't even realize you're using AI. It's just like your companion. It's there, and then there's obviously larger I think implementations that you'll probably see bigger companies go through, like putting those agents we talked about in different departments in their company. Those also help too when you think from a training perspective. When you come in, if there's this, AI, whatever the role is, right, that you can learn the basics of this business from, and it's doing a lot of these, more repetitive tasks, it actually helps with the learning curve for that position. So it's like I said, sometimes it can be a little bit like this is coming to take my job, but in a lot of ways it's going to make life easier. It's going to make the barrier to entry to a job easier. But yeah, you'll start to see, I think, that get rolled out more in larger companies and then trickle its way down to smaller businesses, and probably more in the form of a SaaS product, just because the R&D cost may be prohibitive for somebody that's a small company.
Yeah, and like just you talking about the people, coming for your jobs and all this other stuff, but like and that's how people reacted when I made that Facebook post about the schools being irrelevant. I was like, people were upset at what I said. I was like, you should be excited that if you have children, they don't have to go to university just to get a decent job. Like that should be a great thing. We should be celebrating the death of a university because that means that you don't have to go spend 100 grand like what our parents and stuff did when they had a child was how do we start saving for college? It's like
Yeah.
that should not be a thought in your brain when you have a child. It should be how can I enjoy my child and help them become a great person? Not, oh my God, now we got to save for college. That should not be a worry. And I think it's been so programmed into everybody's got these AI and horror American dream type things like, oh, the American dream, the white picket fence in the house and all that stuff is being destroyed and stuff. But it's like, good. Like we aren't in debt anymore. Like this country has been ran on debt and money being pushed around. But it's like the technology is helping reduce the cost of these things. And if we've got this great tech in the world, that means we can have more painters, we can have more artists, we can have more people being creative and not having to just, work away and do these monotonous tasks of like putting a stamp on something. We can just get a robot to do that. Now you can go do whatever else you want because things are going to be cheaper because now we don't have to pay a robot health insurance. We don't
Yeah.
we don't have to pay the robot anything. We just pay for it and then it just does the task. So things will be cheaper because we have allowed them to do the task for us and now we have freedom to go do other things. And I think it's something we should definitely be celebrating the fact that technology is making our lives easier so that we can have freedom to do other things.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think some of that is the fear of, it's not being done the same way anymore. Like I think about if I showed my grandparents a smartphone, if they were still alive, they would be like dumbfounded by that, right? Like that. So, this is interesting because I don't think, robots aren't going to be so smart that they'll be able to show up and paint your house probably, you know, soon, maybe someday. So there's still plenty of jobs out there for where, you can get an entry level type of job. You may see some of the you walk into a McDonald's and there's more kiosks and more kitchen automation. So instead of 15 people back there, there's one or two. So you will see things like that. But I think some of that doom and gloom is more just the, I'm being shown this new technology now. I don't understand it, right? It's we're unfortunately, as I get older, right, I'm thinking, I'm gonna at some point look at emerging tech and be like, oh my god, that's magic. Like I said, like my grandparents, if I showed them a smartphone, but we just, I had a Game Boy when I was a kid, so to me, a smartphone is just a better, Game Boy, right? I grew up with technology in my hands, so it's interesting, but it's true. A lot of people are afraid, what kind of world are my kids going to grow up in, what kind of jobs are they going to get. There's it's definitely I think there's a psychological impact of AI, and I'm not, not my space, so I won't dive too far into that, but there's definitely um an impact to people's perception of the world with these technologies and what that looks like. It's very different, and it's just starting, right? It's just in a little chat window for the most part right now. So it's only going to get a little harder to navigate.
It's definitely something that we have to pay attention to make sure that we're going at things at the right rate. I'm not saying like, everything's just going to take over all at once. The things are only as smart as we allow it to be. And, as you were saying earlier, open AI is open to the public to feed it information. So that's how it's getting its info. And I listened to a lot of music podcasts, and there was this guy, he was talking about people who think robots are going to take over the world obviously don't have like Siri at home because she can never do anything I tell her to do. So it's definitely something that a lot of people, they kind of have the thought, but they aren't really understand the application of a lot of the things. And it's like, yeah, it's gonna be a while before we have something like the movie I, Robot, where we just got
Right.
robots as an assistant literally walking around with us, helping us do stuff, or they're like employees of a company or something like that. We're still trying to grasp the concept of the software before we even start getting great at hardware and software together via robots and manufacturing or what have you. So I do think that it's getting definitely easier. Companies are understanding what's going on, but when the consumer really um, is benefiting from all this type of stuff, I think that's when the buy-in will come in. Like people are getting like smart homes, temperature changes, telling your garage door to close, your vehicle, using an app for your phone to start your vehicle and stuff like that. Like those are the things that will get people excited about technology, and developers will come out of nowhere. Like people will be like, "Oh man, this is a cool game," and you figure out that you can create games or apps. Even like Instagram and Facebook are making it easy for people to understand video editing and photo editing and stuff like that. So I celebrate when consumers are understanding how to do a very simple task like these.
So it's funny about iRobot. I watched it fairly recently. There's a scene where Will Smith's in there and he pays the tab at the bar, and it's supposed to be an absurd amount of money for like 4 beers. It's like $40 or something like that. And I was laughing because back then they were like, that was like a foreshadow of like, oh, the future things are going to be crazy expensive, and that's literally like what it costs for 4 beers now. So I thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, to your point, like I have a Google Home, right? And it doesn't always tell me all the information. So I'll ask it certain things it knows, but a lot of things it says, here, I found this web page for you, right? And so then, they rolled out Gemini. So I have Gemini on my phone, and it's able to explain more things, right? So it's incrementally better, but yeah, it's not Skynet from Terminator, right? So but the crazy thing is this stuff is getting, better faster than it used to be, right? I remember when, Pentium 2 processor came out, years after a Pentium 1, and you were like, that was so exciting, but now it just accelerates way faster. There's the chips get faster, the amount of, workloads you can run in cloud environments is you can just turn that up and just keep going, right? The ability to scale without having to go bring in more hardware. So it's just the limitations aren't there. Now it could be expensive, right? So that's some of the issues with AI. Why everyone's not just building their own AI at home like Tony Stark, right? Is it's not cheap, but the resources are there where you can build this stuff and you can scale it and it can scale quickly. If the funding is there.
What do you see in your own work, as far as like advancements or futuristic type things that you can see in the near future? No, I'm not thinking like 20 or 50 years down the road, but like, maybe next year, this year, whatever, that you're probably working on yourself to help service your customers.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So we'll keep looking at use cases and trying to do these POCs for agents inside of other businesses, but that could impact us down the line too, right? There's a world where there's a virtual software engineer that writes a lot of code, especially if it's more repetitive code. So AWS had this cool case study where they took, thousands of these Java 8 applications that Amazon had and used their AI to upgrade them from Java 8 to 11. And that used to be, the work of like tons of junior level people to go in, and it's fairly routine. You upgrade the framework, everything breaks, and then you go fix it, right? So now they're using, developer agents to do that, right? And it's very much like it was this in version 8, it's this in version 11, so it's a little more structured, but that's going to keep evolving, right? So it can do, even more programming tasks autonomously. So like that took them a couple days to do. That's probably a team of 100 people taking a year to try to do manually, right, as a person. But so I think for me, yeah, eventually we're using some of these cool tools. Like we use Code Whisperer, which is AWS's, kind of code companion, to help make us more efficient. But those tools will augment us for a while, and then eventually start to do more on their own. So yeah, it's gonna affect everybody, right? Even people in technology. So we have to you know get our team to start learning how to build AI so that they're building these things, we're building these things instead of sitting on the sideline watching it take over what we do.
So what does Code Whisperer do?
It's basically, so if you're in your development environment, let's say you use a Visual Studio Code as a text editor, it'll sit there as you go through and it'll recommend certain things. You ever hear of like pair programming where someone will sit behind you and go, fix that, you shouldn't do that, right? So it's like your programming companion will even, finish blocks of code for you. So it's like, yeah, it's like having, when I was a junior guy, we'd sit with a senior developer and they would walk us through our code, tell us what we did wrong, as part of training. So this just can do that for you, right? And it can help you write cleaner, better code, move faster. Imagine having like a Stack Overflow right there with you to go, this is actually the best way to do it, right? So again, it's aggregating best practices and different information and just saving you time instead of having to go dig through all this information yourself or ask the person next to you. But eventually you're going to be able to have a virtual product manager that takes a business case from the business, turns that into user stories, sends it to the virtual developer, it takes it and makes a technical implementation and codes it. I mean, you're going to have a whole virtual agile team, right? That's, yeah. Well, is that tomorrow? No, but it's definitely something I keep in the back of my mind, right? We all have to look at what does our business look like in 10 years.
So something in the automation industry or manufacturing, the thing like the two different, I believe it's two different things you could do, as far as like implementation of software or coding, whatever, is like there's end user, which that means we are using your product, we're using your service, whatever, and then there's a systems integrator. And what you were just describing with this whisper is like I'm thinking maybe in the future, most people or most companies are going to gear themselves toward needing system integrators because you're basically going to be um, taking. your own like ideas or codes and trying to help companies implement what the stuff that you are using. So like take OpenAI, like you have this they have created chat gpt and used it as a tool, but I think in the future there'll be people who take that, create their own thing, and then start implementing it into other people's companies. So it's like, hey, this is this thing that we created, you should use this, and like basically trying to convince companies that the thing that they made is use. I know I'm explaining the since the beginning of time, that's what all people have done, created something, convince somebody to use it. But as far as like software and engineering and programming, I think that's what it'll turn into, is everybody's going to have like their own coding, software programming, and then trying to convince companies like Microsoft Excel. Everybody uses Microsoft Excel. But I think in the future there might be thousands of Microsoft Excels, and your companies will be trying to convince them like, "Oh, we made this for paper companies. Like use this because our product is phenomenal." What's your take on that? I'm that's just something I just came up with. I don't know.
No, you're 100% correct. So there's we talked about OpenAI being a completely kind of public platform, and then we talked about some of the things we're doing that are very proprietary to our customers. Well, there's an in between there where there's a, software as a service company that, instead of me making you your own virtual marketing agent, they sell one that everyone can use. And so you buy theirs on a license and then you feed it some of your data. So it's the kind of the in between. It's more secure than the open AI, right, which is public. It's not maybe as secure and proprietary as your own. But again, if you're a smaller business, that might be an easier way to integrate AI into your company. And some people can live with that compromise, right? Not everyone needs their own IP in house. It, it's not for everybody, right? Some people it makes sense, some people it doesn't. So yeah, absolutely. There's a huge space for that, for people who can build products. We have a company here in Tampa that's what they do. They have this kind of a virtual marketing assistant, and they've been building it for a long time, and they have more of their own proprietary model. So that's yeah, there's definitely that stuff is on the horizon, and as much as we can figure out how to democratize this AI and get it into everyone's hands. It's kind of it's, I heard a YouTube short the other day. Neil deGrasse Tyson was asked, why don't we just desalinize water? And he said, well, it costs, you want to pay $10 for a bottle of water. It's cheaper to ship a water little square bottle from Fiji, right? So the same thing with the AI, right? If I have to pay $100,000 a month to license an AI platform, that's only going to fit a certain audience, right? So as this stuff, people figure out how to make it cheaper, as the costs of what we call compute, right? Costs of hardware, costs of cloud go down. We'll be able, you'll see more of that where people can get AI into their business. That's something that's a little more secure and proprietary. Or right now, OpenAI is cheap. It's probably not going to stay that cheap, just based on how much it costs them to run that every day. But you have the downside of it's cheap because there's so many people on it. They're using your data, right? So we're gonna have to get to a place where you can at least get something that's more secure into your business, but it's not as much as running your entire own AI platform.
Yeah, that I've had that same thought about the desalinizing one. Because again, that goes back to what I was saying earlier. Don't know the value, like, don't know the cost. I don't know, like, any of that kinda stuff. It just makes sense, like, "Oh, yeah, let's just desalinize water," but and that's just people's take on some things is we don't know how much things cost, so we just come up with these crazy, uh, solutions to things, and it's like, "No, that doesn't work like that."
Well, and it's interesting because it's all the same cost, right? Like, why is it expensive to run AI? Is the same reason it's expensive to desalinize water. It's energy, right? Energy is expensive. So either two things will happen: either energy will get cheaper, right? So if we had some, you know, miniaturized nuclear fusion going on at the data center, it'd be a lot cheaper, right, to run AI. But so that's one scenario. The other scenario is, let's say we're running out of water. Well, $10 for a bottle of water sounds more attractive when I don't, if I'm in Flint, Michigan, and I have no clean water to drink, right? Unfortunately. But luckily, I think they've solved that problem there. But it's not. Unfortunately, we've seen there was a period where South Africa didn't have water. It's a reality where we could have places where there isn't clean water, and $10 for a bottle of water all of a sudden makes sense. So it's good that that technology is there. Uh, Hopefully, the cleaner, cheaper energy scenario happens first, 'cause I think that's just better for humanity. But the reality is there may be a time where we have to desalinize water, or running AI is just important. It needs to happen, right? There's somebody that will fund that, right? Because in the long run, it creates a lot of opportunity. It saves a lot of money. It advances, I think, a lot of things in society. I mean, think about what the impact it would have on healthcare, right? Uh, Better diagnosis, better, you know, better outcomes from drug trials, things like that. I mean, just all the, I'm not a healthcare guru or anything, but just the implications there. If people can live longer, if people can live in life in a way where they're not spending as much on healthcare, where insurance companies aren't spending as much, right? So it's a big industry. I don't think there's a world where somebody's not funding AI being pushed forward, but like I said, it's got to work its way to being a more commoditized thing at some point if we want to get it into the hands of everyone, like you said earlier, for it to become more of a cost-effective consumer product.
Absolutely. Well, it's about time to wrap up. If you could just go ahead and give everybody like some info about how they can contact you or understand your services, websites, whatever you got.
Yeah, the easiest way to get a hold of me, and I always love to talk. So if you go to kenpomella.com, so KenPomella.com is my personal website. I have other interesting technology thought leadership pieces on there. There's definitely some AI on there. There's a little bit more about the RevStar story on there too. And so if anyone actually needs help kind of implementing this stuff, or they're at that stage, they can click through there, and we can help them, like to actually take that journey and talk through what it looks like.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and speaking about the different things that you do and how you service people and where technology is going, where it came from and how we can continue to be excited, I guess, to about, where AI and all these different things are taking us. So thank you for shedding your knowledge on that.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks for everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.